Again, my father's voice boomed through our basement. You're not doing it right, Marcus. A real man needs to be stronger. I was 17, and this was what my father called training, his twisted version of preparing me for the real world. The basement had become his personal boot camp, where 3 times a week, he pushed me through grueling combat exercises he'd learned during his military days. Dad, please, I gasped, my arms trembling from holding the defensive stance he demanded. We've been at this for hours. His face darkened, that familiar look that always made my stomach drop. Are you talking back to me, boy? Before I could respond, he grabbed my arm, demonstrating what he called a simple defensive maneuver. But this time was different. This time, I heard the crack before I felt it. The pain was immediate and blinding. I crumpled to the floor, cradling my right arm as waves of nausea washed over me. Through tear-blurred vision, I saw my father's expression shift from anger to something else. Fear. Get up, he ordered, but his voice had lost its edge. It's not that bad. Walk it off. My mother came running down the stairs, probably alerted by my scream. What happened? She demanded, looking between my father and me. Training accident, my father said quickly. The boy lost his balance. Fell wrong. I wanted to scream that it wasn't true, that he'd done this. But years of conditioning kept me silent. Mom helped me up, her hands gentle but her eyes avoiding mine. We should take him to the hospital, she said quietly. No, my father's response was immediate. It's just a sprain. Ice it and rest. He'll be fine. But I wasn't fine. The pain was getting worse, and my arm was swelling rapidly. My mother, despite my father's protests, finally insisted on taking me to the emergency room when my fingers started turning purple. In the car, she rehearsed the story with me. You were training in the basement, martial arts practice. You lost your balance and fell. That's all. We don't need people getting the wrong idea. I nodded, fighting back tears of both pain and frustration. This wasn't the first time I had to lie about my injuries, but it was definitely the worst. The emergency room was busy that night. As we waited, my mother kept smoothing my hair, something she hadn't done since I was little. It was her way of showing affection when she couldn't find the words or the courage to stand up to my father. Marcus Anderson. A nurse called my name, leading us to an examination room. Dr. Sarah Mitchell was the attending physician, young, with kind eyes but a sharp, observant gaze. She listened to my mother's practice story about the training accident, her expression neutral. I'd like to examine Marcus alone, if that's all right, Dr. Mitchell said, her tone professional but firm. My mother hesitated. I should stay with him. Hospital policy for adolescent patients, Dr. Mitchell replied smoothly, just for the initial examination. Once my mother left, Dr. Mitchell's demeanor changed subtly. Marcus, she said gently, I need you to tell me exactly how this happened. I repeated the rehearsed story, but my voice wavered. Look at me, Marcus, she said quietly. I've seen a lot of training accidents. The injury pattern on your arm, it's not consistent with a fall. My throat tightened. She rolled her chair closer, speaking in a low voice. Whatever you tell me stays between us, but I need to know the truth to treat you properly. Did someone do this to you? Years of kept secrets pressed against my chest. Dr. Mitchell's kind eyes held mine, offering something I rarely experience, safety. My father, I whispered, the words feeling like broken glass in my throat. He was showing me a defensive move. He said I needed to be stronger. Dr. Mitchell nodded, her expression carefully controlled. We need to get x-rays. Will you trust me to help you? For the first time that night, I felt a glimmer of hope. I nodded. The x-rays confirmed what Dr. Mitchell had suspected. She showed them to me on the light board. The clean break in my radius, the twist pattern that clearly indicated forceful manipulation rather than a fall. This type of break, she explained quietly, has a very specific signature. It's what we call a characteristic assault injury. No fall could have caused this pattern. My heart raced as I realized what she was saying. Years of covered bruises, explained away sprains, and hidden pain were suddenly being dragged into the light. I'm legally required to report this, she said, her hand gentle on my uninjured shoulder. You're still a minor, Marcus. This isn't your burden to carry alone anymore. As she spoke those words, I heard my mother in the hallway, her voice rising in protest. My father had arrived at the hospital. Dr. Mitchell saw the fear in my eyes. Stay here, she said firmly. I'll handle this. Through the partially open door, I could hear my father's commanding voice. We're taking him home. This was just a training accident. Mr. Anderson. Dr. Mitchell's voice was steel wrapped in silk. I need to discuss your son's x-rays with you. Dr. Mitchell's voice carried through the door as she confronted my parents. These x-rays show a spiral fracture consistent with a forceful twisting motion. This is not an injury pattern we see in falls or training accidents. Are you accusing me of something? My father's voice was dangerous, the same tone that usually preceded his worst training sessions. I'm stating medical facts, Mr. Anderson. As a mandated reporter, I've already contacted Child Protective Services and the police. The silence that followed was deafening. Then my mother's voice, trembling. There must be some mistake. We would never. Catherine, my father cut her off sharply. Get Marcus. We're leaving. You can't remove him from the hospital, Dr. Mitchell stated firmly. Not until he's been properly treated and the authorities have conducted their investigation. I heard heavy footsteps, hospital security responding to Dr. Mitchell's earlier call. My father's voice dropped to a threatening whisper, but I couldn't make out the words. The door opened, and Dr. Mitchell returned with 2 security guards positioned outside. Marcus, she said gently, the police are on their way. I need you to tell me if there have been other incidents. My hands trembled as I pulled up my shirt sleeve, revealing old bruises in various stages of healing. The training started when I turned 13, I said, my voice barely audible. Dad said he was toughening me up. Dr. Mitchell documented everything, photographing the bruises, noting down dates and descriptions. Each click of her camera felt like another brick being removed from the wall of silence I'd lived behind for years. 2 police officers arrived, followed by a woman who introduced herself as Andrea Torres from Child Protective Services. They interviewed me separately, their questions gentle but thorough. Through the window in my room, I could see my mother crying in a hallway while my father argued with another officer. His face was red with rage, but for the first time, he couldn't control the situation with intimidation. Marcus, Andrea said, drawing my attention back, given the circumstances, we can't send you home with your parents tonight. Do you have any relatives you could stay with? I thought of my Aunt Sarah, my mother's sister. She'd stopped visiting 2 years ago after a huge fight with my father. Now I wondered if she'd suspected something wasn't right. My aunt, I said. Aunt Sarah. She lives about an hour away. Andrea made some calls while Dr. Mitchell finished treating my arm. The break required surgery to properly set the bone, but they could put a temporary cast on for now. My father's voice suddenly boomed through the hallway. This is ridiculous. I'm his father. You can't keep me from my son. The security guards moved quickly, and I heard scuffling. Dr. Mitchell stepped out briefly, then returned looking grim but satisfied. Your father has been escorted from the premises, she informed me. He's been told not to return without police permission. My mother appeared in the doorway, her makeup streaked with tears. Marcus, baby, please, tell them the truth. Tell them it was an accident. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Behind her pleading expression was relief. She knew. She'd always known. Mom, I said quietly, it wasn't an accident. It was never an accident. She covered her face with her hands and slid down the wall, sobbing. Andrea knelt beside her, speaking in low, firm tones about enabling abuse and the consequences of silence. By midnight, my arm was in a cast, and Aunt Sarah had arrived. When she saw me in the hospital bed, her eyes filled with tears. I knew something was wrong, she whispered, hugging me carefully. I should have pushed harder, should have done something sooner. You're here now, I said, and for the first time that night, I felt truly safe. The police had taken my father into custody on charges of child abuse and assault. My mother was being questioned about her role in concealing the abuse. Andrea explained that I would stay with Aunt Sarah while the investigation proceeded. As we prepared to leave the hospital, Dr. Mitchell came to check on me one last time. You're very brave, Marcus, she said, adjusting my sling. What happened tonight? Speaking up, that takes real strength. I thought about my father's twisted definition of strength, about all the times he told me I wasn't tough enough. Looking at Dr. Mitchell, at Aunt Sarah, at the people who had stepped in to protect me, I realized that true strength had nothing to do with enduring abuse in silence. Thank you, I told Dr. Mitchell, for seeing what nobody else wanted to see. She smiled, handed me her card, and wrote another number on the back. This is a support group for survivors of family violence. When you're ready, they can help you process everything. As Aunt Sarah drove me to her house that night, I watched the hospital disappear in the side mirror. My arm ached, but for the first time in years, I could breathe freely. The training sessions were over. The lies were over. Tomorrow would bring police statements, court proceedings, and hard conversations. But tonight, I was just a teenager in his aunt's car, watching streetlights blur past, heading towards something that felt a lot like freedom. 6 months passed like a whirlwind of change. My father's trial was set for next week, and I sat in Aunt Sarah's garden, flexing my newly healed arm. The physical therapy had worked wonders. Dr. Mitchell's recommendation had been spot on. Living with Aunt Sarah was like discovering what family should actually feel like. No walking on eggshells, no training sessions, no carefully rehearsed lies. She'd enrolled me in a real martial arts class, my choice, not an obligation, where the instructor taught respect alongside technique. My mother had finally found her voice too, though not in the way I'd expected. After that night at the hospital, she'd agreed to testify against my father. She moved into a women's shelter, started therapy, and was slowly rebuilding her life. Our relationship was complicated, filled with both hurt and healing, but at least now it was honest. Marcus, Aunt Sarah called from the patio. Dr. Mitchell is here to see you. I hadn't expected the visit, but Dr. Mitchell had become more than just the ER doctor who changed my life. She testified in the preliminary hearings, provided medical documentation, and somehow always seemed to know when I had follow-up appointments. "How's the arm?" she asked, sitting beside me on the garden bench. "Better." I showed her the full rotation. "The physical therapist says I'm ahead of schedule." She smiled, but I could tell she had something else on her mind. "The prosecutor called me today. Your father's lawyer is pushing for a plea deal." My stomach tightened. "What kind of deal?" "He's willing to plead guilty to reduced charges, but part of the deal involves you making a victim impact statement in court." I'd known this might come up. The support group had talked about impact statements, the power of confronting abusers, of speaking your truth. Still, the thought of facing my father made my hands shake. "You don't have to decide right now," Dr. Mitchell said gently. "But Marcus, from what I've seen in similar cases, sometimes confronting the person who hurt you can be an important part of healing." That evening, I talked it over with Aunt Sarah. She'd helped me with homework, taught me to drive, and shown me what unconditional love looked like. Her advice had never steered me wrong. "Whatever you decide," she said, squeezing my shoulder, "I'll be right there with you." I spent the night writing and rewriting my statement. How do you summarize years of abuse in a few paragraphs? How do you explain to a court what it feels like to be afraid in your own home? The day of the hearing arrived too quickly. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, but my father's presence filled it like a storm cloud. He looked smaller somehow, in his orange jumpsuit, without the power to intimidate. My mother sat on the opposite side of the courtroom, flanked by her therapist and a victim advocate. She gave me a small nod, part encouragement, part apology. When the judge called me forward, my legs felt like lead. Aunt Sarah squeezed my hand one last time as I walked to the podium. Dr. Mitchell, sitting in the gallery, gave me an encouraging smile. I unfolded my statement, took a deep breath, and began. For years, I thought strength meant enduring pain in silence. My father taught me that real men don't show weakness, don't ask for help, don't break. But he was wrong. True strength isn't about how much abuse you can take. It's about having the courage to say enough. My voice grew stronger as I continued. I talked about the basement sessions, the covered bruises, the lies we told neighbors and teachers. I talked about the night my arm broke, about Dr. Mitchell's kindness, about learning what real family should feel like. "The night you broke my arm," I said, looking directly at my father for the first time, "you told me I needed to be stronger. Well, I am stronger now, strong enough to stand here and tell the truth. Strong enough to make sure you can't hurt anyone else the way you hurt me." My father's face remained stone-like, but I saw his hands clench under the table. He no longer had the power to frighten me. After the hearing, the prosecutor informed us that my father had accepted the plea deal. He would serve 7 years with mandatory counseling and a permanent restraining order. Outside the courthouse, Dr. Mitchell caught up with me. "You did good in there, Marcus. Really good." "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. "Without any of you." I looked at Aunt Sarah, who was crying proud tears, and my mother, who stood awkwardly nearby but finally free from my father's control. Actually, you could have. Dr. Mitchell smiled. You always had this strength inside you. You just needed someone to help you see it. That evening, Aunt Sarah hosted a small dinner. My mother came, bringing a photo album from before the abuse started. Dr. Mitchell stopped by briefly, bringing news that the hospital was starting a program to better identify and help abuse victims, inspired partly by my case. As I looked around at these strong women who had helped me find my voice, I realized something profound. My father had tried to teach me about strength through violence and fear. But real strength was what I saw in this room, the strength to speak up, to protect others, to heal, to love. I was finally free from my father's twisted version of training. The real lesson hadn't been about taking punishment. It had been about finding the courage to stop it.